What is going on, college basketball fans? Welcome back to another video, and today the new Joe Lunardi dropped for us, and we are going to fill it out from the first round all the way to the national championship with our updated March Madness bracket predictions. We are only, less than 2 weeks now away from Selection Sunday, where we will be able to fill out our official bracket. Make sure you guys subscribe if you guys are new. We're going to have, of course, our bracket breakdown and predictions after Selection Sunday when the main bracket comes out, but also a ton of other college basketball content and March Madness content here on the channel as well. You don't want to miss it, so hit that subscribe button for me. And without further ado, let's get into our updated bracket predictions. The new Joe Lunardi, we kind of been alternating between CBS Sports and Jerry Palms and ESPN's and Joe Lunardi's. So we're back with Joe Lunardi's here this time. And I will say, whenever I was going through making this bracket, I felt a few regions were very, very strong. In particular, the East region that has Duke as the number one overall seed over here. I feel like some regions are very, very strong and have a lot of teams that I think are going to make runs this year in March Madness. But that led to some of the other regions having some opportunities for some lower seeded seeds, in my opinion, to make a little bit of a deeper run. So without further ado, let's get it started, starting with our South region, which is the Auburn Tigers still as our top overall seed, and they will be going up against either Southern or Bucknell, and I am going to go with Auburn there, of course, to win that one. And then we do have Creighton versus Utah State. Very interesting matchup here because Stephen Ashworth, the point guard for Creighton, transferred from Utah State, so he will be facing his former team, and I believe he is from Utah, so kind of like a homecoming game for him as well. So that would be very interesting, and I would expect Creighton to win that one behind a big game from Stephen Ashworth in that one as well. So I am going to take Creighton in the 8-9, kind of a 50-50 matchup there. Clemson versus either Nebraska or Boise State as our 12th seed. This would be a fun first four game or kind of your last four in game, because Nebraska and Boise State are two of the programs like that are in Division One. It's two of the more prominent programs that have never won an NCAA tournament game before. So given this situation, one of them would have to win their first ever March Madness game. So that would be kind of exciting. And I think in this in this scenario, I am going to go with Boise State to actually beat Nebraska, because I just feel like Boise State, with Tyson Degenhart in his senior season, I feel like they have more experience as a team. But Tyson Degenhart versus Bryce Williams would be amazing in the last four in game, or the first four game, whatever you want to call it. That would be an absolute treat to watch. But I am going to pick Clemson over Boise. I do think Boise State could keep it competitive there, give Clemson a little bit of a scare, but I really like this Clemson team. I think they're very underrated because they do play in the ACC. Not many people are talking about anyone out of the ACC except for Duke. So Clemson, give them some credit. They are a very underrated team, and it's good to see that they are back all the way up to a 5 seed. Now, I think it is well deserved for the Tigers. Next up, we got Purdue versus High Point, and you guys know, if you guys have been watching my channel, I am pretty high on High Point. I think that they have one of the best offenses in the mid-majors. Well, and the statistics kind of back that up as well. In offensive efficiency and putting up points, they score some of the most points per game in the mid-majors. I like the High Point Panthers a lot, and I do think this would be a very high-scoring matchup because Purdue does good against teams that aren't really that great defensively, and High Point is that. They're not that good defensively, so I think it would be a high-scoring game. I think it would be close down the wire, which would give some opportunity for an upset from the High Point Panthers when in their first ever March Madness NCAA tournament appearance, they get a 13-4 upset. Give me the High Point Panthers over Purdue in the first round. Big upset to get us started here in this first region. Next up, we got Indiana versus Kentucky. Indiana versus St. Mary's, sorry. St. Mary's at the 6 line. I like it. I think that they are a sleeper. They have one of the best defenses in the country, and given the right matchups, they could make a little bit of a push. And St. Mary's has been struggling to get back to the Sweet 16. It's been quite a while. Could this finally be the year? They've been running the West Coast Conference very easily, including 2-0 over Gonzaga, looking very well. They slow the pace down. That is what Coach Bennett is going to do, and they're going to play defense, force turnovers, try to get some extra possessions. I think that they can definitely do that against Indiana, and I just don't trust Indiana enough in that one to move them further. I'm going to trust St. Mary's, a very consistent team who has performed well defensively, even against teams like Gonzaga twice, who is a good offensive team. So I think, and I just realized I did type St. John's there and not St. Mary's, but St. Mary's, both really good defensive teams, by the way, to move on there past Indiana. And then we do have Kentucky versus Utah Valley. I'm not very high on the WAC this year. Grand Canyon, if they do get in, I think I could see them potentially being in a game with somebody. But Utah Valley, I just don't see them doing anything in March Madness if they get there. So Kentucky, even though they are losing Jackson Robinson for the season due to injury, I'm going to have Kentucky move on. They're just so good offensively. Right before I actually started recording this video, they put up a lot of points on LSU, looked like themselves again offensively. I do think their defense could get them in trouble down the line, but for now, I think over Utah Valley, they should be okay. I don't think that they should still be a 3 seed. I think they're a little bit overseeded there, but I will have them out of the first round. Next up, we got San Diego State versus Illinois in our 7-10 matchup, and this is one I could see going either way. And at first glance, I look at it and say Illinois can be turnover prone, right? They could turn over the ball, or if they can protect the ball, they could definitely beat a team like San Diego State, who's not going to necessarily put up a ton of points. So that is an interesting matchup there. Do you trust the freshmen against a team like San Diego State that does have a little bit of experience? They have some freshmen and sophomores themselves that are getting some playing time there, but they are a very good defensive team and can force turnovers. Some of the freshmen on Illinois, particularly Will Riley and Jakushionis. So, yeah, I do think this is an interesting matchup. It all depends on if Illinois can protect the ball. And you know what? I'm going to give this one to Illinois. I'm going to say Illinois can protect the ball in this one, and I am going to give them this pass here and trust them a little bit because they look so good against Michigan the other day, and give them this one over San Diego State in the first round. And then Iowa State, I am going to have Iowa State over Bryant. They play BYU tonight. I'm interested to see how they perform. They're actually started right now as I am recording this video, so that is going to be a very interesting game. Iowa State getting fully healthy at the right time. They need to be fully healthy heading into the tournament. I think they could be dangerous in this one. I still trust them a little bit. So next up in our second round, we got Auburn versus Creighton. Creighton is a team that can put up some points, and they do have a good rim protector. Unfortunately, against Auburn is a very good defensive team themselves, and they also can put up a lot of three-pointers, and they're going to make them. So I am going to trust Auburn here in this one, and they have one of the best players in the country in Janai Broome. Give me the Auburn Tigers to move on past Creighton. And then we got Clemson versus High Point. And can we see the High Point Panthers move on to the Sweet 16 as this year's Cinderella? I'm going to go with no. I'm going to go with Clemson here. I trust them. They have some experience. They were in the Elite Eight last year. Chase Hunter is an excellent player who can be a closer for them, and also Ian Shefflin is a great player down low, and also Victor Lakin, a very underrated player there for Clemson as well. He showed up in some big games, particularly against Duke in the Clemson versus Duke game. He showed up big time, and Clemson had some big wins this year, and I think that they will definitely be able to handle their business here against High Point in the second round. So give me the Clemson to move on to Sweet 16 for the Battle of the Tigers there in that one. Next up, we got St. Mary's versus Kentucky, offense versus defense. I think St. Mary's, like I said, they perform pretty well against, some offensive teams like Gonzaga, beat them twice. I kind of see this as somewhat of a similar matchup to the Gonzaga matchup for St. Mary's. I do think that Kentucky is more like guard oriented, whereas Gonzaga has more of a front court that they kind of play through. I know Ryan Nembhard is really good and they do kind of play through him as a playmaker, but they get a lot of their scoring production through their front court, whereas Kentucky, they're going to shoot threes. They're going to play through their guards like Ortega Owe, Lamont Butler, and Kobe Brea. So I do think that St. Mary's, it is going to be a little bit different to Gonzaga, but they got to slow down the pace, get off to an early lead, and I think St. Mary's will have no problem to beat Kentucky. They just got to limit Kentucky from going on runs, and if St. Mary's can get up off in front early, get some early stops, and slow down the pace, I think St. Mary's is going to be fine to cruise past Kentucky there in that one, 6-3, St. Mary's to the Sweet 16. Illinois versus Iowa State, that is a very fun matchup there in the second round, and like I said, I trust Iowa State a lot more. I think, it is going to be tough for Illinois to get past San Diego State's defense, but Iowa State has just as good of a defense as San Diego State, and they also have players who can put the ball in the basket as well, and I think with a healthy Curtis Jones back, that is going to be huge for Iowa State. I think Tamin Lipsey has got some experience playing without Keyshawn Gilbert and Curtis Jones. That is only going to help him more as he is just getting more and more experience as a point guard. And with him, Keyshawn Gilbert, Curtis Jones, I think that they are going to be very dangerous in March Madness. And with guys like Josh Jefferson and Milan Momcilovic, I think that Iowa State is going to be primed for a March Madness run. And then we do have Auburn versus Clemson in our Sweet 16. I do actually think there is some potential for Clemson upset here, but I think Auburn is so good. They're going to be very tough to beat. And I think that sometime in the second half of this game, Auburn is going to hit a few big-time threes, whether it's from Tahad Pettiford, Miles Kelly, Denver Jones. Somebody's going to hit some big shots. Chad Baker-Mazara, one of these guards, are going to hit some big-time shots, back-to-back threes, something Clemson is not going to be able to recover, and I'm going to go with the Auburn Tigers to move on to the Elite Eight. And then we do have St. Mary's versus Iowa State in our other Sweet 16 matchup of this region. And I like Iowa State. Again, guys, I do think that St. Mary's is a very good team. I do think they can get back to the Sweet 16 this year, as I do have them there. But I think Iowa State is too good of a team for St. Mary's to handle, and I am going to trust Iowa State here, who also have a really good defense, know how to play at that type of place. They've played teams in the Big 12 that plays that type of basketball. They're going to be prepared for it, and Iowa State just has to hit their shots, get out into transition. I think that they can do that, and also play good on the defensive end. Don't give St. Mary's any easy buckets, force some turnovers. That is going to be huge for Iowa State in that game. I think that they are going to be able to do it. And then our Elite Eight matchup, it is a rematch from the first round of the Maui Invitational. I hate how many rematches there are going to be in this bracket, but it is just the way it is set up by Joe Lunardi, especially one of the regions when we get down to, I believe, the Midwest region, which is the one where Houston is the 1 seed. There are a few rematches in there that have some possibilities as well that I don't necessarily like to see, but I am going to have Auburn, once again, just like in the first matchup, win this one a little bit more handily this time, have more control in this game. So give me the Auburn Tigers to win this one. I think that their guards are just so experienced. I mean, everyone of their starters on this team, except for Todd Pettiford, on Auburn, or kind of their main rotation, I should say, is a senior, and they have veteran guards on this team that, even though their best player isn't necessarily a guard, which is kind of what people look for in March Madness teams to win the championship and make a deep run to the Final Four, they kind of have a unit of guards that can play good defensively as well, especially a Denver Jones and a Chad Baker-Mazara, and they can play good defensively against Iowa State's guards. And then I think Janai Broome has a big day against this Iowa State front court. So give me Auburn to move on here in this one as our first Final Four team. Now let's move over to this West region where Tennessee is our top seed, and they'll be going up against Norfolk State. Now, I am not going to pick a 16 over a 1 seed in this, but I will say Norfolk State has been a very interesting team. Ever since like the end of February, beginning of March, they've hit like a half-court buzzer beater, I'm pretty sure, and they also have been dunking all over teams, hitting windmill dunks and fast break. They're a very fun team to keep an eye out for. If they do somehow get a win in March Madness, that is going to be a very very, very fun story, but I am going to pick Tennessee. I do like to pick upsets a lot sometimes. Last week's video, I chalked a little bit more than I usually do, because I like to, be realistic with my upsets, but also what happens in March Madness most of the time does not seem realistic. Like, nobody would have thought Fairleigh Dickinson over Purdue or UMBC over Virginia or St. Peter's over Kentucky were realistic picks, but it happened. So I do like to take things like that into consideration. I'm not going to pick a 16-over-1, though. Tennessee has looked really good lately, and I'm going to pick them over Norfolk State, so they are safe for now. BYU versus New Mexico, I think that would be a very good 8-9 matchup, though. Very 50-50 game for me, but BYU's looked good, and this video is going to come out after they do face Iowa State, so hopefully it didn't get blown out after they've looked so good. But Richie Sanders, Edgar Demon, the freshman phenom, they have been playing outstanding. They got Catchings, who is, I believe, a freshman or a sophomore. He's the younger player who has been playing very good for them. And they do have some really good front court pieces as well that play very hard. I like this BYU team a lot. They put up a lot of points. That BYU-New Mexico game is going to be in the 80s. It's going to be a high-scoring game. It's going to be a fun one. Give me the Cougars to move on. Next up, we got Missouri versus Yale in our 5-12 matchup. Last week, I did pick Yale in an upset pick. This week, I think they have a little bit of a harder matchup. I think it's going to be hard to keep up with Missouri scoring in the first round, so I am going to go with Missouri to move on in that one. Next up, we're going to have Michigan versus Chattanooga. I don't like Michigan a lot. I'll be honest. I'm not that high on Michigan. If they do get the right matchup, I will pick a team to upset them in the first round, and I am looking to possibly do that. I just don't necessarily trust their guards. Trey Donaldson is a pretty good guard. Normani Burnett can be a good shooter. But if he's having a bad shooting game, I think that there is a huge possibility for a good mid-major team, especially if they were matched up against the High Point. I think it would be a much easier matchup for High Point against Michigan than it would be High Point against Purdue. That's just me, though, and in my opinion. But Chattanooga, I don't think they get it done. I am going to go with Michigan to move on. So our 4s and 5s are safe in this region. Next up, we do have UC San Diego versus Marquette. And UC San Diego is a very good mid-major. I did think about taking them here in this one over Marquette, but Marquette had a really good non-con run this year, and I do think they slowed down a little bit, got a little bit underrated during Big East play. I do think there is still some potential there. I think that they can still make a little bit of a run, at least come out of the first round. I'm going to trust them here against a really good UC San Diego team. This is going to be a pretty close one for a 6-11 for sure. It's going to be a close one, but I am going to take Marquette here to move on in this one. I just think with Cam Jones, David Joplin, Stevie Mitchell, they got some guys that can really score on this team, and I think that, like I said, they still have potential to get a win or two in March Madness, in my opinion. Next up, we got Texas Tech versus Northern Colorado. This one hurts because Northern Colorado is definitely my favorite 14 seed here. And I do hope that they do get a better matchup, but I got to go with Texas Tech in this one. Texas Tech is another one of those just very good offensive teams that I just trust in this one. And I with Elijah Hawkins at point guard, who has really stepped up this year, Chance McMillan, who has been unreal, JT Toppin, who transferred from New Mexico, has been killing it on the boards, just scoring in general, killing it, man. This Texas Tech offense is legit. Give me the Red Raiders to move on there. Next up, we got Mississippi State as our 7 seed versus West Virginia. And West Virginia is my favorite team. I think this is a decent matchup for them. I think that Mississippi State isn't going to be able to score like a ton of points. They're not a super offensive team. And West Virginia kind of needs a team like that to beat in the first round because Javon Small is very good at scoring and controlling the pace of the game and playmaking. But unfortunately, what has been the doom for West Virginia recently is teams have been blitzing Javon Small off the pick and roll, double teaming him. And although he is a good playmaker and he does make the right read sometimes it does force turnovers and it does force some late shots some late shots into the shot clock. And that's really been hurting West Virginia and why they've kind of fallen off a little bit after getting so many big-time wins early on in the season. I'm going to say that Mississippi State does implement that strategy, but from blitzing Javon Small, I will say if he is not getting double-teamed in March Madness, teams are going to find out really quick, and by the Sweet 16, he will be double-teamed because if he's not, West Virginia will be in the second weekend of March Madness. Next up, we do have Michigan State versus Central Connecticut. Central Connecticut, very good 15 seed. I'm not going to pick them against Michigan State and Tom Izzo. They've been playing so good lately, so there's no way I can do that. But Central Connecticut is a very scary 15 seed, in my opinion, that I will be keeping my eye out on. If they do get a good matchup, that is something I could potentially pull the trigger on. Next up, we got Tennessee versus BYU. And I picked High Point over Purdue. This is arguably a bigger upset. I'm going to go with BYU over Tennessee and in a 8-1 upset in the second round. I just think that BYU is so good offensively that they can compete with a team like Tennessee just by getting some transition buckets, shooting the ball really well. They shoot the three ball very well. Tennessee does not. Other than Chaz Lanier, they don't really have that many good shooters. So Tennessee could be in trouble if BYU get out in front early and hit some big-time threes. I do think that BYU has some potential there to upset a team like Tennessee in the second round. I think that they can do it. Give me the Cougars to move on to the Sweet 16 in year one under Kevin Young. Next up, we got Missouri versus Michigan. That would be a pretty fun 4 versus 5 matchup. I am going to go with the 5 seed, though, in Missouri. I just think that they're one of the best offensive teams in the country. Another very good shooting team that I just don't know if Michigan's guards can keep up with some of the guards on Missouri. I mean, between Tamar Bates, Caleb Grill, Tony Perkins, even Jacob Cruz can come into the game and be a firecracker and knock down 2 or 3 threes. Missouri is a force, and I didn't even mention Mark Mitchell. That's too much for Michigan, in my opinion, and I do think that Mark Mitchell could have a pretty good day defensively on a guy like Danny Wolf of Michigan, because that's kind of where Michigan is going to rely on Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden in the pick and roll and slowing the game down against a team like Missouri. I just don't see him being able to do it. Give me Missouri to move on in that one. Next up, we got Marquette versus Texas Tech. A very fun matchup, honestly. I could see Cam Jones taking over in that game and being able to pull off the 6 over the 3, but Texas Tech, I'm going to trust them, man. I'm going to trust Texas Tech. They played very good in conference play, especially in Big 12 play. They're the only team in Big 12 this season to beat Houston in the conference, so that they're very good, man, and I do think that they match up pretty well against most teams because they can score a lot of points and be in a lot of games, and they can shoot the ball very well, and they have players like Elijah Hawkins and Chance McMillan that I feel like can take over games. I'm going to trust Texas Tech in this one, and I think Cam Jones could definitely win that game for Marquette, but I'm going to go with Texas Tech in this one. And then we do have Mississippi State versus Michigan State, and I believe this is a rematch from last year. Was it in the second round as well? Or maybe the first round. I can't remember. I feel like this was a rematch from last year's March Madness, but I could be mistaken there. And I believe Michigan State did win that game, so I am going to go with Michigan State again. I think that this Michigan State team, especially with how Trey Holloman and Jace Richardson especially have been playing lately, it's taking Michigan State to another level, in my opinion. They have super athletic players, especially Cohen Carr and Carson Cooper. Those are two very athletic players that can just catch lobs, and is going to be Dunk City in I don't know which city they'll be playing in, but in March Madness this year, it'll be Dunk City, wherever the Spartans are playing. So we have our Sweet 16 set for the second region, and we do have BYU versus Missouri in what will be one of the best offensive games for sure of this tournament. I think it could be like this game. Both of these teams could have put up 90 to 100 points. It could be like that Colorado-Florida game last year where it was 100 to 100. That would be very fun. Would love to see it. And two very good offensive teams. I am going to go with Missouri, though. I think that they have more I trust their scorers a little bit more and their shooters a little bit more in this one to will their team to the Elite Eight. So I am going to go with Missouri to win that one. Next up, we do have Texas Tech versus Michigan State. And again, Michigan State, not the best shooting team. Texas Tech can be a good shooting team. They're more so a team that likes to get out in transition. That's kind of like Michigan State, though. Michigan State, they could be fooled into playing a faster paced game than they want to because they have guys who can get out in transition, catch lobs and stuff. But I think that Texas Tech, I think the key matchup in this one would for sure be Jace Richardson versus Chance McMillan. Will the freshman be able to take over this one? I think it's possible, but I am going to go with Texas Tech in this one. I feel like that they are the better overall team, or they have more talent on their team. So I am going to go with Texas Tech, but it would not surprise me. Trey Holloman has been getting a lot more minutes recently because he's been playing so good. That matchup between him and Elijah Hawkins is going to be key as well. It would be a very good game, close down to the wire. I will go with the Red Raiders in that one. And then in our Elite Eight matchup, Missouri versus Texas Tech, our 3 versus our 4 seed in this region. I think these might be the 2 best teams out of this region, honestly. I know Tennessee is really good, but I could definitely see them losing to a team like BYU. Michigan State is also very, very good. It is going to be close between them and Texas Tech, but I could definitely see this 3 versus 4 matchup. And I am going to go with Texas Tech to move on to the Final Four this time. I just think that they are so good offensively. They can also force a little bit of turnovers as well there with Missouri. It's going to be definitely a high-scoring game, though. And I'm going to trust Texas Tech to keep on getting it done. 2 very good coaches that have bright futures with these 2 programs, and Dennis Gates and Grant McCaslin. So shout out both of them. But I'm going to have the Red Raiders move on here to the Final Four. And we have shades of 2019, Auburn and Texas Tech back in the Final Four, both for the first time since 2019. They didn't play each other in that Final Four, but they were both in it, so that is pretty cool there. That they both kind of have they both have a shot to get back there this year. Duke versus either Quinnipiac or SEMO, and I gotta go with SEMO in this one to advance to the second round. Just kidding. I'm going to go with SEMO over Quinnipiac, but of course we are going to go with the Duke Blue Devils. They, again, just demolished their opponent and took their souls last night against Wake Forest. I mean, that was pretty embarrassing what they did to them. Cooper Flagg looked unreal in that one. They're going to be tough to beat. I know a lot of us just don't want to, believe that Duke can win it all this year, but they definitely can. They have been playing so good as of late. More players are stepping up, including guys like Isaiah Evans, who has been shooting lights out, getting more and more minutes. Very interesting. I mean, between Con Kneppel and Isaiah Evans, those got to be 2 of the top 3-point shooting freshmen in the entire country. Next up, we got UConn versus Vanderbilt. And I think that would be a very good down-to-the-wire matchup. And I do think that Vanderbilt could pull it off. I'm going to go with UConn. I think that they have more talent on that team, 100% with Liam McNeely solo ball. They still got Alex Caravan. I think they have more talent on that team. I think Vanderbilt's going to keep it way too close for comfort. They definitely could win that game, but I will go with UConn to move on. Then we do have Maryland versus Drake in our 5-12 matchup. This is a matchup I really don't like for these teams because I think both of these teams have a lot of potential to make a little bit of a run, whoever does win this game. Unfortunately, for this region, I like so many of these teams, and I'll go down the list. I'm just going to say all these teams I feel like could make a run to at least the Elite Eight or the Final Four. Duke for sure. Maryland, Drake. Arizona, maybe. St. John's, VCU, Florida. All those teams I really like as potential Final Four teams. Minus Arizona. I don't really like Arizona as a Final Four team. I think with the right matchups and Caleb Love playing good, shooting above 35% from the field, especially it's going to take more than that. Probably 40-45% from field. They might be able to make the Elite Eight. But those teams, Duke, Maryland, Drake, St. John's, VCU, Florida, I love all those teams, and I hate that they are all in the same region, but we will continue to pick, and I am going to go with my first 12/5 upset of the video and take Drake over Maryland. I think Drake, Drake slows the ball down a lot, and they're very well coached in that facet, and Bennett Sturts can take over games. I think he's going to do that. Maryland's guards have improved a lot, and Jacoby Gillespie is really good, but they play through Derek Queen and also Julian Reese, and I do think that Maryland can get a win over Drake for sure, but I am going to go with Drake to pull off the 12/5 upset in this one. And then we got Arizona versus Akron, and as much as I kind of just trashed on Arizona a little bit there, I am going to pick them over Akron. I just don't know if I trust anyone out of the MAC this year. I do like Akron. I like Miami of Ohio. But I just don't know if they'll be able to do it necessarily this year. Next up, we do have UCLA versus Georgia in our 6 versus 12. I'm not too high on UCLA. I watched them the other day against Northwestern. They looked pretty decent. They do have a good defense. I trust Georgia. They've been looking better and better recently, getting a win over Florida. They beat South Carolina here tonight right before I record this video. Looked really good, and their guards have been playing a lot better lately, and I think that is going to be key for Georgia in this one. I think their the way their guards have been playing lately is better than UCLA's guards. Give me Georgia, and they got Asa Newell down low. St. John's versus Towson, and I'm going to go with St. John's. You know, you guys know I'm not that high on Towson this year, and I'm very high on St. John's. They might have the best defense in the country. They get a ton of extra possessions. I don't think Towson's going to be ready for that. Next up, we got Kansas versus VCU. Definitely go with VCU. Kansas as a 7 seed is crazy to see. It's always nice to see these blue blood programs kind of see what it's like for an average team fan base, you know. To Kansas fans, this is a horrible year. We're not winning anything. It doesn't even matter if we make the Sweet 16. Who cares? But for a fan of like an average team or average basketball program like me, Sweet 16 would be wonderful. A 7 seed, I'm fine with that. But Kansas, so it's good to see them experience that a little bit, and I hope they lose in the first round, especially to VCU, because I am sky high on VCU. I think that they are an amazing mid-major. They are my favorite mid-major to watch this year. More defensive, but they are a pretty well-balanced team that can do it all, and they have a lot of scorers on their team that can get buckets down the stretch. I really like VCU this year. Next up, we got Florida versus Robert Morris. Give me Florida. I don't see Robert Morris beating the Gators. I mean, is Robert Morris, who is that? Is that somebody's dad? Maybe. Next up, we do have Duke versus UConn, and I will say Duke is going to take out the defending, reigning, 2-time national champs of the past 2 seasons, and that is kind of a cool storyline there, because I believe that the other final team that Cooper Flag was going to commit to, it was down to Duke and UConn, and it'd be when he committed to Duke. So that would be kind of cool there. I'm sure Dan Hurley recruited him a lot. Would be fun to see, and also him going up against his former teammate Liam McNeely. So that would be a really fun matchup there, Cooper Flag versus Liam McNeely. I will take Duke in that matchup, though. Drake versus Arizona. I'm going to go with Drake. I'm going to ride Drake here a little bit and take them to the Sweet 16. I just think that Drake plays the type of game that Arizona could, if they're missing a lot of their threes, missing their shots, Drake is going to take full advantage of that, take some long possessions, slow the game down, and I could definitely see Drake pulling it off in that one. I think it's going to come down to, can Caleb Love hit a big shot in the clutch? Maybe for the win, for the tie, something force overtime to give Arizona a chance, because I do think that would be a very close game down the stretch, and it would come down to that. Next up, we got Georgia versus St. John's, and I'm going to go with St. John's again. I do think Georgia has been playing really good lately, but I can't pick them over St. John's. St. John's has one of the best defenses in the country, as I mentioned. They force a ton of turnovers. They got a lot of length on that team. If St. John's does lose, it is going to be to a very high-scoring team that can shoot threes and protect the basketball, has good, also known as has good guard play, who won't who won't turn the ball over. So until they meet a team like that, I don't see St. John's losing. They're just too well coached, too good defensively, and as good as Georgia's guards have been playing, I don't see them being able to protect the ball against a team like St. John's. Next up, VCU versus Florida. It hurts me to do this. I really want to go with VCU again, like I did last week, all the way to the Elite Eight. But look at this gauntlet they have in front of them. They had to beat Kansas in the first round, which I think that they would do. And then they had Florida in the second round. Even if they did get by Florida, they'd have St. John's waiting for them. That's tough, man. I got to go with Florida. There's no way I can pick VCU over Florida. As much as I love VCU this year, I can't do it. I picked them in the first round. I just couldn't. I can't pull the trigger on them over Florida. But we got Duke versus Drake, our 12th seed of this region in the Sweet 16. I got to go with the Duke Blue Devils in this one. I just don't see them losing to Drake. If Duke loses, it is going to have to be kind of similar to St. John's, a team that can keep up with them offensively, but also score on a tough defense, which is going to be tough. They're going to have to hit some tough contested threes. It is not going to be easy whatsoever to knock down Duke, and Drake is just not that team. They can hit some threes, but if they beat Duke, it was somehow going to have to be, they are going to have to clamp them, and I just don't see that happening and slow the game down. That's the way Drake plays. I don't see it happening. St. John's versus Florida, as I mentioned earlier, St. John's, if they do lose, it would have to be to a team that is going to shoot the crap out of the ball and make them and has a really good offense. I think Florida is that team, and with Walter Clayton Jr., they definitely have a guy who can protect the basketball there and make for his teammates and hopefully protect the ball for them. So I will pick Florida over St. John's in that one. But St. John's, Florida, VCU, all these teams, man, I feel like have potential to make it to the Final Four, so it hurts that they're all kind of in this sub-region here, and we'll all have to meet by the Sweet 16 at the earliest. Duke versus Florida, two of the best teams in college basketball, no doubt about it. This would feel like it could be a national championship matchup. If they're not in the same region, if they're on opposite sides of the bracket, they could meet in the championship. These are that level of teams, and they're meeting here in the Elite Eight. I got to go with Duke, though. The way that they've been playing and putting up points has been unreal, and they're so good defensively as well. Between Malik and Cooper Flag in the front court, that is just unreal defensively for them. Isaiah Evans, Con Kneppel with the shooting. Tyrese Proctor has stepped up. Sion James. This Duke team's loaded, and it's going to take a lot. Florida can put up points, though. They've shown it multiple times this year between Walter Clayton, Elijah Martin, Will Richard. very good players. Alex Condon is back and looking really good. They are one of the better offensive rebounding teams in the country, so that is actually going to be huge for Duke. They cannot allow a lot of offensive rebounds, second chance opportunities for Florida because that is, they're a really good shooting team as well. So those second chance kick out threes are huge for Florida. Duke cannot allow that. I do think it is possible Florida can beat Duke, but I will have Duke make it to the Final Four here as our third team to enter the Final Four as we head into our final region, the Midwest region, where Houston is our top seed, and they will be going against Omaha, and I hope Omaha would get higher than a 16 seed if they do make the tournament, because I am pretty high on them. I think they're a very fun team. After a win, they will beat the hell out of a trash can with their coach's face on it. Pretty fun, if you ask me. I would love to see them, just get like 2-3 wins in March Madness and beat the crap out of a trash can after every game. Would be amazing. Unfortunately, Houston is too good, and I just can't pull off that upset. So we will go with Houston in that one. Next up, we got Ole Miss versus Gonzaga. That would be an amazing 8-9 matchup. I'm surprised to see Ole Miss as an 8 seed. They must have got pushed down from Illinois getting the 7 after they demolished Michigan the other day. So that's very interesting there that Ole Miss is the team that moves down. I think that's actually a really good matchup for Gonzaga, though. Ole Miss is a team that can struggle shooting the ball sometimes, and they're more of a defensive team. And I think Gonzaga, could perform well against that, and they could also not, which is going to be interesting because in their next matchup, they're going to have a similar thing to a much higher degree with Houston. So we've seen Gonzaga against teams like St. Mary's, who is defensive. They've lost to a team like West Virginia, who is a defensive team. Earlier in the season, that was when Tucker DeVries was healthy, though. So can Gonzaga kind of get over that as they have two defensive teams right off the bat? I'm going to say they definitely can get by Ole Miss here in the first round. Next up, we got Oregon versus McNeese State, and I'm just not sold on McNeese. I'm not sold on McNeese, guys. I'm going to go with the Oregon Ducks here in this one, and Oregon has been playing really good lately, and that's kind of what you want to look for with teams heading into March Madness. I know a lot of people are probably sleeping on Oregon. A lot of people would pick McNeese in this matchup. But Oregon had a really good non-conference at the beginning of the year, and they beat teams like Alabama in that non-conference as well. And they're also getting hot heading into the month of March. They're starting to rack up wins again and getting on a little bit of a win streak. So that's interesting to see there. I got my eye on Oregon. Dana Altman, one of the most underrated coaches in college basketball. Jackson Shelstad has potential to be that closer for them as well. Give me Oregon in that one. Texas A&M versus Lipscomb. I'm going to go with Texas A&M. I'm not high on Lipscomb either, guys. And I think Texas A&M's defense would be a problem. Wade Taylor's senior year, they can't go out that early. Next up, Louisville versus either Ohio State or Arkansas. I'll go with Ohio State over Arkansas in that first four, but I don't think either of those teams would beat Louisville. I think Louisville's too good. Chucky Hepburn just put up like 37 the other night. Yeah, he was killing it and did it very efficiently too. I think he was like 9 of 11 from the field. Absolutely killing it. And Louisville, just as a whole, is a very good shooting team. And yeah, we're going to take Louisville to move on here. Then we got Wisconsin versus Jacksonville State. Now, I do think Jacksonville State is a pretty fun team. I think whoever does come out of Conference USA could be a little bit dangerous this year, whether it's them or Liberty. I would say it's one of those two. It could be very interesting, but I do like this Wisconsin team. They've grown on me a lot. I do think there is potential for them to get a 2 seed by Selection Sunday as well. They're just so solid, man, and I got to go with Wisconsin. I got to go with Wisconsin here in that one. And then we do have Memphis versus Baylor, and I'm going to go with, I mean, that's a fun matchup, actually. The more and more I think about it, that would be an amazing first-round matchup. VJ Edgecombe versus PJ Haggerty. Come on, man. Neither of these teams are particularly that great defensively. A lot of you guys might say Baylor just because Scott Drew might be a better coach than Penny Hardaway, but I'm going to go with Penny Hardaway and the Memphis Tigers in this one. I just feel like they have the team that should make it to the second round this year, and Baylor's been quite disappointing this year. I'm going to go with Memphis. A key matchup, underrated matchup in that one would be Dane Danger and Norchad O'Meara down low. Next up, we got Alabama versus South Alabama in-state battle there in our first round, and I'm going to go with Alabama. I'm not going to pick the Jaguars to pull off that first round upset. Houston versus Gonzaga, 1 versus 9 seed, and I thought about it a little bit as we were going through it. Can Gonzaga beat another team that is pretty good defensively and top of the line defensively as well? And Houston can also put the ball in the basket. I think Gonzaga has the best point guard in this game in Ryan Nembhard, who can really play make for them. And that is going to be a huge help. It is going to come down to Battle and Nolan Hickman. Can they knock down shots? I think they can. The front court battle is going to be very fun to watch in that one. Gonzaga does have the front court to compete, particularly with Graham Ike. I'm going to go with Gonzaga to pull off an upset, and we have two one seeds going down in the second round of this bracket. That is very bold of me to do. I know what they say, by rule, you're supposed to have all your 1 seeds to the Sweet 16 just in case. I don't play by the rules. I think Gonzaga can beat Houston, and I think BYU can beat Tennessee. And if those were the matchups in the second round, I think at least one of those would happen. Next up, we got Oregon versus Texas A&M in a 5 versus 4 matchup. That would be very fun, actually. Very entertaining game there in that one. And I'm gonna go with Oregon, actually, in that one. And Wade Taylor, Zurich Phelps, and that Texas A&M defense, I think that they could definitely... that's very 50-50 for me, but Oregon's getting hot at the right time. Texas A&M's cooled off recently. I like to ride the hot team in those 50-50s, and I love Buzz Williams. I think he's a great coach, but Dana Altman also got the coaching advantage there, so give me Oregon. Kind of a sleeper pick. I don't know if many people are taking Oregon right now to make it to the Sweet 16 or even win a game in March. But yeah, I think that they're slept on right now. I think they're very, very slept on right now. Louisville versus Wisconsin, the Chucky Hepburn Bowl. We had the Stephen Ashworth Bowl earlier with Utah State versus Creighton in the second round. Now we got Louisville versus Chucky Hepburn's former team, the Wisconsin Badgers. And do we have to do it here? I mean, I feel like as good as Wisconsin is with John Blackwell, John Tungy, and Stephen Crow, they got a ton of solid players, well coached there by Greg Gard. I think Wisconsin has more talent. If I pick Louisville here, it would be solely because I think Chucky Hepburn would go ballistic against his former team. I'm going to go with Wisconsin, though. I'm sorry. I'm going to go with Wisconsin. I think that they are the better team, and you would think Greg Gard would know how to guard Chucky Hepburn, considering he was on Wisconsin. Give me the Badgers in that one. I really wanted to pull the upset there because I do think that Chucky Hepburn could get it done, but I'm going to go with Wisconsin. I'm going to stick to that because that's a hard one for me because Chucky has been going dumb against a lot of teams. You think he would against his former team and pull off that win, knock him out of March? That would be awesome, but I think Wisconsin's the better team, and I'm going to stick to that. Memphis versus Alabama. Can Memphis knock off Alabama? Put up a bunch of points. They have shooters. Colby Rogers, Tyrese Hunter would have to shoot lights out for them to beat Alabama 100%. I don't know if I could do it. I really want to pick Memphis in that one, but I can't do it. I got to pick Alabama, and it comes back to coaching. I mean, I already got Penny Hardaway beating Scott Drew. Can he also beat Nate Oates, who has been so proven already, made a Final Four last year? I don't know. Gonzaga versus Oregon, and I feel like you guys might know where I'm going with this one. I'm going to go with Gonzaga. I think if they can knock off Houston in the second round, they can for sure knock off Oregon in the Sweet 16. I think it would be a very close game, though. Oregon is a fighting team. They knocked off a really good McNeese team and a really, really good Texas A&M team, so it would be a fight, but I think Gonzaga can put up enough points in that one to seal it and get to the Elite Eight as a 9 seed. And then we got Wisconsin versus Alabama in our 3 versus 2 seed. And I'm going to go with a slight upset of the Wisconsin Badgers to make it to the Elite Eight and knock off Alabama. And I think that there are a few reasons why. I think Grant Nelson and Cliff Amorie could be a problem down low a little bit. I mean, Cliff Amorie is not really that great offensively, but it's really Alabama's guards. And I feel like if they can just have an off shooting night, Wisconsin's defense is decent. If they can just play good defense on the 3-point line, that is what Alabama's going to do. They're going to shoot 3-pointers. They're going to drive to the rack. They have a very NBA pro-style offense where they're not really going to utilize the mid-range that much. And if there are missing shots, and then Wisconsin can go back down the court and have a guy like Tungier, who reminds me a ton of Johnny Juzang, who can get down to the rack, score little floaters, score in the post as kind of a wing power forward type player. He can kind of do it all and shoot threes as well, get to the free throw line really well, and he's got shooters around him like Blackwell. I like Wisconsin in this matchup. Give me the Badgers to move on. It would be a shock, I think, to some people, but yeah, let's go with Wisconsin. And then to make it to the Final Four, we have Gonzaga versus Wisconsin, and I could see this one going either way. I'll be honest. I'm going to go with Gonzaga because I want to see a higher seed make the Final Four. But it's very 50-50 to me. I feel like these teams match up against each other very well. It's going to come down to, I feel like Battle's defense on Tungier, I feel like he would be the one guarding him, would be very key. And I could see Wisconsin getting Gonzaga's bigs into foul trouble early, which would help Wisconsin. It's going to come down to whoever's shooting the ball better. And I also believe that Gonzaga has the best point guard on the court as well in Ryan Nembhard, which will help them. But that would be a very fun Elite Eight matchup. I am going to go with the Gonzaga Bulldogs to make it in as the 9 seed, though. So our Final Four is set. Auburn, our 1 seed, versus Texas Tech, our 3 seed. Duke, our 1 seed, versus Gonzaga, our 9 seed. So some very fun Final Four matchups. If this was the Final Four, I would definitely not be disappointed. There would be some really good games. Auburn versus Texas Tech. Texas Tech has the offense. I don't know if they have the defense to be able to slow down Auburn. I think it is going to be a very high-scoring game. There are a lot of really good players in this matchup, but JT Toppin versus Janai Broome is the obvious matchup in this one, which would be key. And I think Janai Broome is the better defender. I think that he could play some good defense on JT Toppin. It is going to be the difference, and I'm going to have Auburn to the national championship game. Duke versus Gonzaga. And Gonzaga, you may be thinking they have no shot against Duke. I do think there is a possibility they could win. Again, I think that Ryan Nembhard is the best point guard on this court. Unfortunately for him, Duke has a lot of really good defensive guards who will be guarding him, like a Sion James, like a Tyrese Proctor, which is going to be very tough. And Duke has more proven shooters, even though they are freshmen. Colin Kneppel and Isaiah Evans are better shooters than honestly anyone Gonzaga has. I just don't trust Nolan Hickman enough to hit these shots in this big time game. I think that he will hit some shots against Houston, Oregon, Wisconsin. But how long can you rely on him? Eventually he's going to miss a few, and you can't have a lot of mistakes against this Duke team. Their offense is too fluid. They run there with John Shire. They're going to get a ton of open looks, and they don't miss a lot of them. And that's not even accounting to who is going to guard Cooper Flagg, because he is kind of a mismatch for a team like Gonzaga. You can put Battle on him, but he's going to be a little bit too short. You can put a guy like, I guess, Graham. No, you're not going to put Graham EK on him. You can run two bigs with Huff and EK and put one of them on Flagg. They're just going to get beat off the dribble. It's not going to be pretty. This is the tough one there for Duke defensively. Give me the Duke Blue Devils. Auburn versus Duke. The more and more I watch Duke, the more I think that they're going to win the championship this year, as much as I don't want to pick them. And then the more and more I watch Auburn, the more I believe they're going to win the championship this year. And that is the tough part about this. Duke beat them earlier in the year. It was in Cameron Indoor Stadium, though. It would be down to the wire. One of these coaches is going to get their first ever championship, which would be awesome to see. John Shire and Bruce Pearl. Well, for Bruce Pearl, at least his first D1 championship. I'm going to go with the Auburn Tigers. I think that, they've been to the Final Four. Bruce Pearl's been to the Final Four before in 2019. Ty Jerome double dribbled. And who knows, if they would have called that double dribble, Auburn would be in the championship that year versus Texas Tech. Who knows what would have happened? Either maybe they would have won the championship. They have a much better team this year, and they are back to finish the job. I feel like they have the experience, both coaching and players, to get it done. They have good shooting. They have good defense. All that Duke has, minus the experience. So that is where I'm leaning towards Auburn in this matchup. If they do rematch this year, let me know what you guys think about my bracket. I am back to Auburn as my national champion at this point. What would be your guys' Final Four given Joe Lunardi's recent bracketology? Who would you have in your Final Four, and who is your national champion at this point? And yeah, guys, that's going to do it. Make sure you guys subscribe if you guys haven't already. We got a ton more March Madness content coming your way. And thank you so much for watching.